Here, and this will ruffle feathers. Every time I say this, this ruffles feathers, right?
Not you.
No, not
you.
me.
Never ruffle
I'm not
feathers.
polarizing. Most people who think they are training jiu-jitsu are not training jiu-jitsu. They are training sport grappling.
Sport grappling is the term we like to use.
You're training sport grappling. If you're training jiu-jitsu, you are training to deal with strikes and firearms and knives and improvised weapons
and headlocks and clothing grabs
and
yes.
somebody jumping out of your bathroom closet while you're taking a shit
right.
and jumping on you, right? It's not.
When do we learn that defense?
Right.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Like. We are back. What time is it? Is back, and we had a little layoff, but we are up and running. New hosts, new energy, new topics. We got a lot for you, and you're going to see I am joined by a co-host. Who the hell are you?
Chuck Maiorana, just recently retired from the Pennsylvania State Police after a 25-year career. I was a deputy sheriff about 4.5 years before that, so just getting out of about a 30-year law enforcement career. Currently trained here with Jeff at Gracie NEPA. I've been with Jeff for a long time. I'm sure we'll get into that, but first of all, happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you. We are filming on Easter.
Yeah, Easter morning, right? Can't wait for some manigote later, you know what I'm saying?
I'm making prime rib.
All right. To each his own.
Yeah. So, current rank in jiu-jitsu. Didn't mention that.
No, not yet. I'm a black belt under
belt.
Jeff. I got my black belt last September, the end of last September. I've been training for approximately organized jiu-jitsu, like on the mat in an academy, probably since 2008. So, man, 2008.
2008.
It's weird to say, right?
Right.
It's weird to say that it's been like 18 years. Took a little bit of a 5-year hiatus away from the academy. I'm sure we'll get into that in future episodes, or maybe even today. I'm not sure. But continued to train law enforcement jiu-jitsu throughout that 5 years, and then that kind of led me back to the academy in a strange way. Everything happens for a reason. So, yeah, I've been training a long time, and most of the time with this guy right here.
2008 would have been Kapause Avenue? No.
I mean, when I say I joined the jiu-jitsu gym in 2008, the truth is probably before that, I was popping in here and there.
Yes.
I remember my start in jiu-jitsu came from Billy Wagner.
Yep.
And you know Billy Wagner very well. You knew him from high school. He was one of the OGs in this area as far as becoming involved in the grappling game. Back in the 90s probably right around when you started, around that same time.
Yes.
I think he was training with Tattoo at the time, who was like a Brazilian that had come over from Brazil and was living and teaching in the area. And we were troopers together. Mm-hmm. I met Billy in the academy back in 2000. I knew he was from Northeast Pennsylvania. He's from up in the South Abington area. I was from Pittston, so as soon as I realized he was a Northeast guy, we became friends immediately in the academy. I was a couple months ahead of him in the academy, and we formed a bond immediately. But fast forward a few years into our career, probably like 2006-ish, probably even earlier, probably 2005-ish, he had heard that I was boxing. And I grew up in my neighborhood with a bunch of my friends. We call it the Sixth Ward, you're well aware. Yep. My crew is called the Sixth Ward. And a lot of those guys were fighters. They had a background in karate, they had a background in boxing, and they introduced me to that stuff. And we used to box and spar all the time. And one of our sergeants in the state police at the Northeast Training Center, which was down in all the in-service training that the state police had in our area in the Northeast, we trained out of the Northeast Training Center. And the sergeant there at the time, his name was Sergeant Rakowski, he was huge into boxing. He has a garage on his property, I'm not going to say where he lives, but he has a garage on his property that has, the walls are covered with boxing memorabilia. Autographed pictures of Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray. I mean, you can't, there's not a space in between the pictures. That's how much stuff he has. He has a Muhammad Ali pinball machine. I mean, anything you can think of related to boxing, this guy has. So I was at a training class one day, and he overheard me talking to another trooper about that I was currently sparring in boxing, and he came over to me after class, and he said, "Hey, I heard that you box." And I'm like, "Yeah, I mess around." Now, keep in mind, when I say I boxed, in no way am I purporting that I was a boxer.
Right.
We boxed with each other. We had a little club going. I did not do any amateur boxing. I have no fights, but you can tell by my nose that I actually did box,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It's crooked.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm not purporting to be a boxer, but we messed around with boxing and martial arts. So when he asked me, I said, "Yeah, I do a little sparring." He's like, "Would you?" And at the time, I don't know if you remember this. It was like an article back then, but Chase Prison, the state correction institution in Dallas, they call it Chase. They had just outlawed boxing in the prisons, and before that, they were having like tournaments with inmates and stuff like. But at some point, some legislation came about where you can't box in the prisons anymore. So Sergeant Rakowski had an in somehow with the prison officials, and he got them to donate the boxing ring that was located in SCI Dallas to the Northeast Training Center for the state police. So when we were there in these training classes, you would look behind the instructors, and there's this gigantic full-size regulation ring. So he had asked me, he's like, "Hey, would you be interested in coming here like off duty and working out, like boxing and stuff?" But we had heavy bags. There was a speed bag platform in the training center and all that stuff. So I'm like, "Sure, absolutely." And he's like, "My sons are actually training to be Golden Glove boxers. They're training for the Golden Glove tournament that's coming up. Would you mind giving them some sparring rounds?" And now I'm a young trooper at this point. I'm still in my 20s, and I'm like, "Sure." And now I start going there and sparring with his teenage sons, and they were super good. They weren't like imposing figures, but man, did they have hands, right? And they were very, very good boxers. And that led to me, you know, starting to invite some of my other trooper friends. The word got out, like, "I heard you're going down there and boxing with the Sarge and stuff like that. Yeah, you want to come?" And you know how that goes.
Yeah.
Everybody says yes.
Yes,
but,
and nobody shows up.
Nobody
Yeah.
shows up.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
everybody's, "Oh, yeah, I'll go down there and knock your face." Okay, I'll be there. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know where to find me.
Yeah.
But Billy Wagner was very interested. He was like, "Man, like, I'm very interested in martial arts. I do some like ground stuff, and I didn't even know what that meant at the time. You know what I
Right.
mean? I had seen the UFCs and stuff like that, but like at this point in time, you're talking the early 2000s, kind of, you know, not that you forget about the UFC, but we weren't really messing around with any of that stuff. So he's like, "Yeah, I do ground stuff, but you know, I'd like to get better with my hands." And I'll never forget it. He came down, and he's gonna laugh when he hears this, and we talk about it openly. But he came down, we got in the ring, and the Sarge had a camera set up on the ring because he wanted to film his sons,
Right.
just so he could critique and go and make some changes and obviously correct some of the stuff that would happen during their sparring rounds. So we filmed it. We filmed the round between me and Billy, and you know, I'd say I got the better of him. And we joke about it to this day that, you know, you better hope I don't find a VCR because I'll plug that in and show everybody, you know what I mean? But the ironic part was, so I get the better of that. And Billy was, you know, Billy was a bigger
strong
than
guy,
me,
yeah.
stronger than
Yeah.
me. But I just had better hands than him at the time. And then I'll never forget, after we were done, and I don't know if it was 1 or 2 sessions or maybe even that after that first session, when you stepped down from the ring, it was a matted area, right? We had old wrestling mats that had probably been donated in the training center. And I'll never forget, he said, "Hey, do you want to like move around and do some of the stuff I do?" I'm like, "Yeah, what's that stuff, that UFC stuff?" He's like, "Yeah, kinda." I'm like, "Sure." And I'll never forget, like, we started kind of like playing around, standing up, and he took me down and he mounted me, and I couldn't get up. And it wasn't like an instructional lesson. It wasn't like, "Oh, I'm going to show you what I did here." It's, "I'm going to hold you down
Yes.
for 6 minutes." And I struggled, couldn't get out. Now, don't get me wrong, he was very respectful. It's not like, you know, he ground and pounded me there. We were buddies. But man, I had a very big realization that day that, wow, like, I thought I could fight. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah.
And we, you know, been in some fights, and especially with my crew and our mouths at the time. I was no stranger to fighting, but that was an eye-opener. And I always say this, and you've heard me say this a thousand times, that when you have an experience like that, you have one of two thought processes. I believe there's one of two thought processes. I'm sure there's something in the middle, but one is your ego takes over and you say, man, I'm not doing that ever again.
Never doing that again.
Never doing that again. I'm just going to pretend that I was what I thought I was.
Yes.
And I'm going to leave this place. Nobody's ever going to hear about this. I'm not going to tell my buddies back in the ward. I'm not going to tell anybody at the barracks that, you know, that just happened, and I'm just going to walk around carrying my luggage and pretending I'm,
A tough guy.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
And that's one response. And then you never do it again, and your ego takes over, and you just want to forget about that. The other response is, I better learn that.
Yes.
And that's the response I had. And, you know, here's me who just came out of the ring where I could basically do whatever I want with Billy, and now we're down on the ground on the mats, and you know, he could do whatever he wants, and I didn't like that feeling. And as we know, a lot of street fights end up on the ground.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And when you end up on the ground with someone who doesn't know how to hold you there, then you never know the danger of running into someone who knows how to control you on
Yes,
the ground.
correct.
And, you know, I'm sure I was in fights that ended up on the ground, but not with anybody that knew how to hold me there.
Right.
We would probably both bounce up, and then the fight would continue.
Yeah.
And that was an eye-opening experience. So I remember coming home and talking to my wife about it. I'm like, man, I can't believe it. Talking to my friends about it, because we had watched the early UFCs. My friend's father was super big into martial arts, Mr. Ganeri, and he had all the bootleg UFC tapes. We used to watch it. We used to go down in Joe Ganeri's basement and put pillows on the ground because we didn't have mats.
Yeah.
It was a basement with a hard floor. We propelled and try to choke each other. We didn't know what we were doing. Like, this is back when we were watching the videos, get all hyped up and just try to choke each other with the moves that we saw, but we had no idea what we were doing.
Right.
So I went home and told Joe, his son, who's one of my best friends, and I'm like, man, like, I got to learn this. And, you know, I would work out with Billy a couple times, but that I didn't consider that like organized jiu-jitsu. And then I'll never forget, I was watching television. This was probably like a few months to a year later. I was watching television, and there was an infomercial for the Gracie Combatives DVD.
I remember that. I remember that infomercial.
Yeah, it was literally on television.
It was terribly shot. It was
It-
terrible.
It was like Hander and
Yes,
Heron,
yeah.
like old school,
Yeah.
infomercial style.
Yes,
The picture of the DVDs,
Yep.
right there. And I'll never forget. Like, I was, you know, my son wasn't even born at the time. I was probably just sitting in my living room with my wife, and I'm like, oh my God, that's the stuff like Billy Wagner does. I mean, I'd love to learn that. That's all I said. And then I ended up getting it as a gift a couple months later. My wife must have, you know, wrote the 800. I don't even know how. Like, well, I forget. I don't know if there was a website or an 800
I don't
number
even
back
remember.
then. I don't remember.
Yeah,
but
I don't remember.
I ended up receiving it as a gift from my wife, and then I was like, wow. So I called Billy. I'm like, all right, bro. Like, I got these DVDs. What do you want to do? And he's like, interesting. And so basically, what we did, I have a ranch-style house, and my basement was obviously unfinished at the time. So what we decided to do was, between myself and Billy, we chipped in and got some mats. And I put a TV down there. When I say TV, I mean like old school tube on the back.
The big
The
tube.
thing was
yeah.
this big,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
We'd carry it down the steps, put it there, put the DVD player connected to the TV. And basically what I would do is I would tell Billy, hey, let's train on Thursday. We bought the mats, we chipped in together, bought the mats. We start off at like a 12 by 12 section of mats in my basement, my dusty basement, with the DVDs. And I would say, all right, let's train Thursday at 4 o'clock. And then what I would do is I would watch the first DVD, and I would watch it, and I would watch it, and I would watch it between Monday and Thursday. And when Thursday rolled around, we would basically do like the first 2 lessons or 3 lessons, and that's how it started. And for about, and then it you know, the word got out. A couple other troopers that I worked with that you now know, EJ and Mark Pizzuti, and a couple guys heard that I was, you know, training in my basement, and you know, talked to them about it. And I don't know if you know, but I can talk, right? I'm a talker. Right? Yeah. So you know, and they became interested, and now guys start coming down to my basement. So like probably the first full year of my training of jiu-jitsu was off the DVDs with my buddies in my basement. I literally put in and I believe it still exists, an application for what they call the Gracie Garage.
Gracie Garage, yeah.
At the time. There were these Gracie garages that you could submit to, but because I was in law enforcement, when you submit for these Gracie garages, the idea behind it is it's for people that don't have a jiu-jitsu academy in their area.
Yeah.
And they're looking for other people that have these DVDs. They all speak the same language, but they don't really have a place to train.
Right.
So the idea is supposed to be, they'll publish your, they don't give the exact address, but they'll publish your city and your location.
Yep.
There's a Gracie Garage there. Here's what it's called. Here's the guy's email. And then other people will contact you and say, hey, can I come and train with you at your Gracie Garage? Now, because I was a state trooper at the time, I asked the Gracies and put in for an exemption of, hey, listen, this is a bunch of law enforcement officials training together. We don't really need, we arrest people in this community.
Yes.
We don't want
Yeah.
strangers coming into my house, knowing where I live, blah, blah, blah. And they were super cool, and they're like, yeah, we're going to still list it as a Gracie Garage on the website. People may contact you, but we're okay with you refusing them, because the kind of like the guidelines where you have to allow people to train with you, or
Right.
you're not going to be a Gracie Garage.
Right.
But they made an exception for me because I was in law enforcement. So I kind of like started training, and I'm sure we'll get into like teaching and stuff, but I basically started training and teaching at the same time, because I would basically watch the DVDs, and then these guys who had never been exposed to any of this before either would come to my basement, and then I would basically be the instructor,
Right.
just because I was able to remember how they taught, how they were showing the techniques, and I was able to very accurately duplicate that in like a setting where there was a couple guys. So we did that in my basement for about a year. Now, during those times, and maybe even before the DVDs, and you may or may not remember this, but I would pop in from time to time. I remember multiple times, maybe 2 or 3 times only, when you were on Mulberry.
Okay.
So this was before
Yes.
Kapaus.
Before, yeah.
When you were in the Northeast Warhorse building.
Yes.
So I remember popping in there with Billy.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I went to these classes at Mulberry, I was with Billy. And I remember those guys, man, the old school guys. Like Tyler was like, I bet Tyler was probably like a 4-stripe blue belt at the time. I remember Tommy Casey.
Yes.
I remember, who's Tommy's brother?
Rob Casey.
Rob Casey. I remember Rob Casey. He trains with us now.
Yes.
I remember Tommy and Robbie Casey. I remember Durkin.
Brian Durkin.
Jimmy
Hedis.
Hedis.
Yeah.
I remember Tyler being there. Now, obviously, they probably, I'm talking popping in
Right.
once or twice, you
Yeah.
know. But, remembering to see like how good these guys were and how good you were. I think you were a brown belt at the time. I know you had talked about your timeline before, and sometimes you say you're a purple belt on Mulberry, but I could have swore you were already a brown belt. Maybe like a straight brown. Maybe no stripes or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure you were a brown belt.
It might have been.
When I met you for the first time, which would have been on Mulberry. And then I popped in there a couple times, but between work and everything else, and you know how it is. Like you say you're going to join something, and I'm going to join, and I think I paid for the month one time and told you I'll be back, and then I never came. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Right? You get busy, or you just, it's not on your priority list. And that kind of like, and we were still training in my basement and stuff like that. And then I remember Billy had come to me and said, hey, I got this buddy who was actually going to start teaching a jiu-jitsu class at Jimmy Simrell's Mixed Martial Arts.
Mm-hmm.
At the time it was on Penn Ave.
Penn Avenue.
Yeah, it was right across from, what was that bar that used to be
The
there?
Banshee.
The Banshee. I think now it's like a restaurant.
Not even sure.
Yeah, I think it's
I don't
it's like
venture
a
out.
fancy restaurant now. But it was right across the street from the Banshee. It was in this second, third floor area, all brick walls, no windows. I remember we used to get 1,000 degrees there in the summer. And Dave Walsh was Billy's buddy. I had never met Dave. He was Billy had told me he was a probation officer in Lackawanna County. Good guy. Had like trained with Hickson, like Gracie, and like all these things. I'm like, man, I got to meet this guy. So I went there, tried a class with Dave, met Dave, loved Dave from the jump. You know what I mean? Dave's an outgoing guy. You've met Dave. He's a good dude, funny. And, like, I'm like, man, I like this, And it was Dave's class. Billy was buddies with Dave. I'm like, all right, let's give this a go. So I joined Simrell's. So I kind of, not that we ever got rid of the basement. We still trained because, as you know, like a couple of the guys with the state police that were training with me, they were very skeptical about going and training with, you know,
Fighters.
fighters,
Yeah.
and it was a different crowd back then. It's not like today where, you know, it was all walks of life. It was the fighting crowd was a little bit different back
Oh, yeah.
then.
Yeah.
Little bit more.
Yeah, you were going to get beat up.
Oh
You
yeah,
definitely want to get beat up.
there was no flow rolling
Right,
back
no.
then, you know, and if
No.
you didn't have the stomach for it, so you know, it was me and Billy for a while, and then we convinced EJ McCarthy, one of our trooper friends, still trains with us here to this day, one of my good friends. He started coming, and we ended up training there for a while, probably about a year. During that year, I got my blue belt. Now, again, we've been training the Gracie combatives at my house
Right.
also.
Yeah.
That helped.
Yes.
You know what I mean? As far as the speed in which we got our blue belts. But at that time, that blue belt was like a test. You had a date, and you're going to perform your blue belt test on this date and at this time. And there was a lot of people that came from the gym, and some people were being evaluated for blue belt, some people were being evaluated for purple belt, so on, stripes, so on and so forth. So I remember going to my test, and it was me and Billy. We were like partners, and it was basically like, show me 3 sweeps from the guard. Okay, and you demonstrated. They didn't tell you which ones.
Right.
They didn't say, show me a butterfly sweep. They said, show me 3 sweeps that you have from the guard. You would demonstrate. Show me 3 attacks you have from the guard. You would demonstrate. Show me, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 or whatever it was. It wasn't 19, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
It was a couple. And that's how the test went. And then at the end, after the demonstration portion was over, then you had a roll. And there was multiple levels in the room, brown belts. I think the highest one was a brown belt, and I'll tell you how I know that in a second. Jimmy was obviously a black belt. Jimmy Simmer was a black belt. He was there administering the test. And, you know, then you rolled, and you rolled with all the different ranks. And then they evaluated you. You know, Jimmy was walking around. Dave was actually in the test, so Dave wasn't walking around as an instructor. Dave was testing for his purple belt on the same day. So, end of the day came, myself and Billy got our blue belts, even though Billy had been training, you know, on and off for years at that
Right.
at that point. But he officially got his blue belt. I got my blue belt. Dave, our instructor, got his purple belt on that day. And the reason I say that there was a brown belt in the room is because it was Pat Hinton. Remember Pat Hinton?
Yeah, sure.
Pat Hinton was a brown belt. He was kind of like Jimmy's best guy at the time that I joined Jimmy Simrose, and he got his black belt on that same day as well. So I remember that as well. So that was my organized start, was at Simrose. And then what happened was, and I always had known about you guys through the Burnettis also. My wife works for one of the Burnettis in the medical field, and you know, she would tell him, oh yeah, Chuck's starting to mess around with jiu-jitsu, and he would, you know, so there were a couple times where I popped in. Even though I was training at Simrose, I would pop in. Now at this point, you're at Kapaus.
Kapaus, yeah.
So I popped in 2 or 3 times when you were in Mulberry. That's before I was even with Simrose.
Yeah. Now, Kapaus was a different animal.
Oh, boy.
That was a different animal than Mulberry Street.
Yeah,
And that's a different animal than we have now. Like Kapaus
Oh, of course. That was
Kapaus
like the heyday of
like-
the cage fights.
Yes, Kapaus was Rocky, like Rocky Balboa gym. There was remember holes in the floor. Everything was brick. The toilets didn't really work well. The cage was there. The mats were like that was an intimidating space.
I gotta be honest with you, it was my favorite one. It's what
the
and
vibe
other
was-
than this,
right,
other than
yeah.
our current academy,
Yeah.
that was one of my favorite.
Yeah.
To walk into that place,
Yes.
you know, as a stranger,
Right.
walking in there the first time. I remember I went with Steve Brunetti, and we walked in, and it was ominous.
Yes,
that's
ominous
the word
is
I
a
would
good
use.
word. Ominous
You
is a
walked
good
in, it was
word.
a big open warehouse type feel.
Yep.
You had that gigantic picture of Elio
Elio,
Gracie
yeah.
above the desk, and it looked like it was 70 feet tall. Like, you know, that's your
Yeah.
brain plays tricks on you. And
Yeah.
there was that weight equipment was to the
Yep.
right, where they did a lot of
crossfitting.
CrossFit
Yep.
before it was even CrossFit, and all the strength training. And then you had like a lower level of mats, and then there was the big cage up
Big
in
cage in
the
the
corner,
back,
and there was
yeah.
always guys in there fighting,
Yep.
preparing for cage fights and
Yep.
stuff like that. And man, that was a cool place. So I popped in there once or twice as well. So I always knew that there was this other team that was like, you know, legit in
Yeah.
the area. And listen, I never got involved with like, oh, we're better than. I never got involved in any of that.
Well, I mean, at that time, it was still like a proving ground.
Oh, yeah.
Like you were trying to prove like you had the best product, you had the best, curriculum, whatever. You had the best fighters, whatever. But I'll say this: like even amongst all that stuff, Jimmy Simmer and I always got along fantastic.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I remember that. He's one of my favorite like jiu-jitsu people. Like it's not like we go hanging out for dinner or stuff, but anytime we see each other, it's a handshake. It's hey, how are you? Like we've never had any. I never had any beef with him. And I know a lot of people in the area don't like, Jimmy. They have some problems with him, but he's always been a gentleman, and I've always got along great with him, and tough, like just tough.
Yeah.
So that was the time where there was just a lot of because MMA had just come to this area, or come to Pennsylvania, I should say.
Yes.
It was like 2009. The Athletic Commission passed it that it was going to be a go, and we had a lot of guys that we had been training MMA.
Yes.
Because we had been going down to Jersey to fight.
Yep.
So it was like, okay, well, it's local now, and let's show people what we got. And we were putting out fighters. I mean, any card that was being put out, we were putting fighters on.
Yeah, they started to get names too.
Yeah.
I mean, you had Gary Peters. What did they call him? Was
Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze. Yeah. And then we had who's the congressman now?
Marty
Flynn, who was an ex-boxer who transitioned into cage fighting. He was on your team. I remember seeing him at Kapaus.
Yes.
He was a very polarizing character.
Yes, he was.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like always having fun.
He still is.
Very loud, always having fun.
As a state senator,
Tough
he's still
kid, you know what I
polarizing.
mean? Yeah. And, like I liked the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I liked Jimmy.
Yes.
I never had a problem with Jimmy. Kind of my split from Jimmy just happened organically. I'm sure we'll get into it, but there was no catastrophic. I always enjoyed Jimmy. Now, there were a few occasions where I would be at Simrose and I'd be learning from Jimmy. Jimmy was very, very generous with his knowledge.
Yes.
And even though it wasn't his class, he would walk by maybe at the end of Dave's class or something like that. We would train specifically in Dave Walsh's class, just because that was the level class. Jimmy at the time wasn't really teaching many group classes, unless I didn't know about them. But in my perspective, he was teaching a lot of privates. He was working with fighters. He was working, and fighters from all different disciplines. Jimmy was like, in any martial art you could think of, Jimmy was legit.
Yes.
He had multiple black belts in multiple arts. He was a kickboxer. He had a very good boxing prowess. He was very good on the ground. He had a Russian sambo background. So very, very well versed in the martial arts. And I remember a lot of times Jimmy would just see us working on something either near the end of class or at the end of class, and he would just come over and start helping us out and stuff like that. I always liked Jimmy. I always liked talking to him. Always liked learning from him. No problems with Jimmy ever. To this day, if I ever saw him, he probably wouldn't even remember me. But if I saw him, I'd give him a big hug and thank him. You know what I mean? Yeah. So the way it transitioned for me is there became a time after about a year I was with the Simrose that you guys merged.
Yes.
So you had left Kapaus Ave, right? You want to talk about how you left Kapaus and ended up in Dunmore at the
Yeah, I mean we can. It was just a brainchild of like bringing the best of the best together. Jimmy's fighters were doing very well in the cage. Our fighters were doing very well. We had people go on to the UFC. So it was let's bring the best of the best together, and just get everybody training.
Yeah.
Now that didn't go in reality as well as it seemed on paper.
Sure, on the business end.
Of things, and then just some ego rubbing. Where some people start to like certain coaches and the way they teach and whatever, and then it was just like this isn't working out.
Right.
We shook hands. Jimmy went his way, and I stayed back and continued teaching in Dunmore. He went on his way and did his thing, but it was just on paper it seemed like a great idea, but in reality it just didn't mesh well.
Right. And how did you make the transition from Kapaus to that training facility in Dunmore that was in the back of the Warhorse headquarters building, not the Warhorse on Mulberry, but when they the one that's still there what was that? Dunham Drive?
Dunham Drive.
Yeah.
Dunham Drive.
Dunham Drive. When did you make the hop from was it Kapaus to there? Was that the lineage?
Kapaus to there, 2009, 2000.
I think it was 9, 'cause I think that's when I started. with you guys.
Yeah, 2009, I think. Yeah, it was definitely
Yeah,
2009.
that makes sense.
Yeah, because that's where really like I started to cut my teeth more and more as an instructor.
Yes.
You know, not that I wasn't instructing
Yeah,
or a
you
good
are-
instructor
were,
prior
sure.
to do that, but I really started to hone in on the fact that I wanted to give out a really good product.
Yeah.
And that's where I started to move away from. We were still doing MMA, but I started to move away from it and really start to focus more from the jiu-jitsu end of things.
Right.
Because I knew that there was a few reasons. Number one, you know, MMA fighters, generally speaking, not everybody, but generally speaking, they're very selfish people. It's me. What have you done
You
for
almost
me?
have to be, right?
Well, you have to be to be
Right.
successful in that business.
Your self-protection mode. too.
Right, you have to be. So, you know, I didn't like that. I didn't like the fact that I had to almost always be, let's say, turned on, like switched on. You know, I was always like, just angry, like aggressive, and that's not me. Anybody who knows me knows that's not me. But it made me that way.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was really getting turned off from the MMA, and I knew jiu-jitsu, and you can only help so many people through MMA. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
how many people did we put out that became career-long fighters?
How many people want to do that?
Right.
Right?
You
Get
know,
in a cage and fight another
right.
human being. That's a
Correct.
small percentage of the population.
But I knew with jiu-jitsu I could help everybody with jiu-jitsu, and I knew it.
Right.
From, you know, kids that were being bullied at school, to women who maybe were fearful of walking alone at night, to law enforcement. Right? That was probably the real true propagation of the law enforcement program that we have now, was
Right.
2009. Because I started working with you guys in some more private group lessons.
Yes.
And then that turned into developing the program more and more and more.
Yeah.
Because at that time, 2009, I had just completed Hoyce's course, because at that time I was still training with Hoyce.
Was that grapple at the time, or was that something else?
That was grapple. Yeah, GRAPPLE. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget what it stands for at this point. Ground retention, I forget.
Yeah.
Enforcement law. I
Right.
have no
There's
idea.
probably law
It was
enforcement
it
in
was
there somewhere.
It was a very forced acronym.
Yes.
That you really didn't make
You had
sense.
to-
when
you had to really get
You had to
there.
really get there. But I had completed that course, and that was an eye opener.
So Hoyce put you through that just as a coach.
Correct.
Because you don't have a law enforcement background.
No, I don't have a law enforcement background, but he wanted. There was myself and Jeremy Lafreniere, a couple other purple belts that he wanted to put through that.
Got it. So you were a purple belt at the time.
Yeah, I believe so. But he wanted us to understand the law enforcement aspect, because he was like, it's very different for law enforcement, you know, jiu-jitsu based. What they can and cannot do, what they should and should not do, is very different from what we would teach on a normal daily basis.
Sure.
So he wanted us to understand that difference. That for me was an eye opener, because that was a week-long course in which I had already had 9 or 10 years of jiu-jitsu under my belt.
Yeah.
So what I thought I knew, I didn't know.
Right.
If that makes sense. It really opened my eyes, and when I came back from that course, I was like, man, I'm really going to dedicate myself to developing this program.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And you know, Hoyce had his curriculum and his program, and then you and I started training more with the police officers.
Yeah.
And at that time, you were doing GST.
Yes.
Did they call it GST at the time, or was it
They
something
did.
different?
They called it Gracie Survival Tactics, but at the time it isn't like it is now. Now you have to literally.
It's much different now. Yeah.
At
much
the
different.
time, they put it out on Gracie University, their platform, and you were able to buy it, and you could own it. You paid, I think it was like $400 back then. I think I paid for it, and you paid for it, and you literally downloaded all the lessons in your library, and you owned them. There was no instructor certification at the time, at least on the website. There may have been whatever.
Something
I don't
going
know
on.
their timeline
Right.
as far as what they were doing across the country with other instructors, but as far as from Gracie University, they published a course, Gracie Survival Tactics, on the website. At the time, I think it was only level 1. I don't even know if they called it level 1 or if they just called it Gracie Survival Tactics, because they, or maybe it was level 1 because they had aspirations for level 2. But you were able to buy it, and I remember I fast forward a little bit, because we had been talking about law enforcement for a while, because And just to backtrack real quick, when you guys merged with Simrose, that's when I came over to you guys.
Yeah.
That's when we all started training, like you said,
pretty regularly.
Pretty regularly. And it was still kind of compartmentalized, if you remember. Like, I remember it was like, okay, this is now Scranton MMA. They renamed it. It was no longer Gracie Nipa and James Simrose Mixed Martial Arts. The new conglomeration was Scranton MMA.
Yes.
That's what was born. That's how Scranton MMA was born. And then, so I remember it was almost like, but we were still kind of segregated. It was still like the Gracie Nipa guys learned from you over here at this, on this time frame, on this, you know, whatever your days were. And then the Simrose guys still were learning, like Dave taught a class on this day at this time. So it was almost like, what are they doing over there? You know, like to us. We still felt like outsiders coming in.
Right.
I don't know if I ever told you this, but like we still felt like, man, they don't like us.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, say what you want to say, there were some really good guys at Simrose, good fighters, good jiu-jitsu guys, but I immediately saw the difference, right? I'm like, man, those guys are the real deal. And not that we weren't,
right?
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you guys had more instructors, you had more experience, you were directly under Hoist, you know, and I remember like just feeling a little uncomfortable. And then I think there came a time where either I jumped into one of your classes or Dave couldn't show up that day, and we jumped in with you. And I just remember how like welcoming you guys were.
Yeah.
And that not only you as the instructor running the course, but like the training partners. We had this thing in our mind, like they hate us. If we roll, they're going to try to kill us because we're the Simrose guys and they're the Gracie.
Right.
And it wasn't like that. Was there a little bit of an element of that? I'm sure there was.
And again, that existed mostly within the fighters.
Of course, yeah.
That existed mostly within the fighters.
I remember feeling very welcomed by I still remember like rolling with the guy like Schwartz. I remember Schwartz was a white belt at the time. I remember rolling with Schwartz, and he was one of the guys that came after you.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Like in the beginning,
Marine.
Yeah,
he wanted to kill. Yeah.
And he was one of the guys that like wanted you to think, yeah, you're those guys and we're these guys.
Right.
But like I very quickly won Schwartz over. I still talk to John to this day.
Yeah.
And I remember like rolling with the Smitties and the Frankies and even Tyler, and you know, and like getting just such good training. And I remember, you know, approaching you, I'm like, man, I really like this class. You mind if he's like, what do you mean? Yeah, you're part of this school now. Like, you're like, sure, of course, you come to any class. And then I would start, you know, and I don't think it was more of like me like choosing to leave Dave's class. I think Dave was getting busy at the time and just couldn't keep doing the class because there came a time where Dave wasn't teaching anymore.
Correct. Yeah.
And also Jimmy was starting to transition out.
He was.
And Dave was very loyal to Jimmy.
Yes.
So Dave left with Jimmy.
Yeah.
So it came at a crossroads where do we follow Jimmy or do we stay here? And we decided to stay there.
Yeah.
And that's how, you know, our relationship started as far as coach-student. And I just remember, and I'm sure you'll remember this, I remember going to you after training in your classes with your blue belts and your white belts. Now here I am, a blue belt, straight blue, you know, coming in as a blue belt to Scranton MMA and rolling with, and some of your white belts were better than us. And I remember coming to you after one of the classes and saying, hey, I'm gonna put a white belt back on. Hey, like I don't feel like I'm at your level of blue belt, whatever that is. But like I feel stupid, you know, wearing this. You didn't give it to me, and you know now I'm at your school, and I just don't feel. And I remember you looking at me and saying, "You earned that. You wear it, and if you don't think you're a blue belt, I'll make you what you believe is a blue belt here. But there's no reason to, you know, discount what Jimmy gave you because you had a lot of respect for Jimmy. You know what I mean? And there's no reason you earn that. You wear it, and then we'll make you what you need to be. Don't worry about what color it is. Right. And then you know that was the start of me, you know, training full time with you guys and those training partners and you as basically my head coach. And then we went from here, and then that eventually like blossomed into the law enforcement program later down the road.
And I'll say you're not alone in handing belts in.
I've heard the stories.
Oh gosh, man, I've had so many people through the years that have come from somewhere and started training with us, and they're like, dude, here's my belt. Like, I can't wear this. This is embarrassing to even wear this, and it would be the same thing. Listen, we'll get you there. We'll get you there.
Right.
And even
all belts are not created equal.
No. Even purple belts would be like, dude, like no, I can't wear this.
Right.
And please take this from me and train me, in your vision, what a purple belt should be. So yeah, I mean it's unfortunate that happens. I don't, there's a lot of reasons why people kind of get pushed along in rank sometimes, but in the end, it's just, hey, we'll get you there.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. It's a belt. Covers 2 inches of your ass. Like
right. The rest is up to you.
The rest is up to you.
That's a Hoist saying, right?
That's a Hoist saying, and we'll get you there. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's happened quite frequently. But
Yeah.
yeah, then we said about the law enforcement, and that was
probably
more Kaiser Avenue. I think we really started to delve into maybe 2010, 2011.
I could tell you specifically when we came up with the idea for the class. Now we had been working as a small group on certain occasions before this, but we were still at Scranton MMA.
Yeah,
I know that for a fact.
We were doing like semi-privates. We were doing like semi-private lessons for law enforcement specific stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then because when we first got to MMA or Scranton MMA, when the merger first happened, we were on the orange mat side.
Yes. Yeah.
And then while we were there, that's when we transitioned to the hockey rink.
Yes.
In fact, I was one of the original guys that helped build it. I remember you had said if you come and help build it, you get like a free private or something like that. I'm in for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like I actually helped put the floor in and the whole 9 yards. We had to build that matted area in the hockey rink. So it was in the hockey rink era. I had seen a Hero and Gracie seminar pop up in Philadelphia, and I remember, and I'll tell you this, like, I had a Gracie University account because I had the Gracie Garage.
Yeah.
Right. So I had the DVDs. Obviously, that suggests that you open up the Gracie. I never did the online belt testing thing.
Right.
That wasn't my goal. My goal was the information. Here's the DVDs. I want to learn this stuff in my basement. That's all it was, right? But I opened the account, got the Gracie Garage and stuff like that. So you were there was back in the day there was hate. There was some hate for online jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. A lot
of hate, and especially against Gracie University because they were doing this thing where you would film a blue belt test.
Yes.
And they would mail you a blue belt.
Right.
And the industry at the time wasn't ready.
No.
And they were like, "What is that? You can't get a blue belt through a camera. Right, yes. You got to grind it out. Blah blah blah." And I remember there was a lot of hate, and even some of the guys in our own training room, kind of like teased me a little bit, like, "Oh, you're on that great. What are you going to get your online blue, like this, that, and the other thing?" And like,
it's ball busting. It's,
you know what I mean.
Part of the jiu-jitsu.
I'm sure I came back with something, but I was also training with you guys in person, so it's not like they didn't look at me as like a strict online guy, right? But you were never like that. You were in full support.
Here's why, and I will say this: I hated the online belt testing.
Right.
And I was very vocal about that. But I loved the idea of an online library, and it was actually an idea that several of us had approached Hoist about years before Gracie University.
Because I think Gracie University started in 2008. So you're saying you had conversations.
We had conversations with Hoist, like, dude, you should do. No. He was dead against it. But we were trying, like, dude, this would be great for your network, guys. Like, we can't always be with you every day, and sometimes we forget information. We could, if you had this video library, and nope. My father, okay, all right, well, and now fast forward, and they're making money hand over fist. Always kind of missed that boat.
Yeah, and not just them. I mean, if you look at the current landscape of jiu-jitsu, name me a legitimate. Like I'm talking about like national brand of jiu-jitsu that doesn't have an online academy. Right. You can't find one anymore.
Yes.
I'm sure obviously some of the locals schools that don't have the ability or the technology to put out an online library are still just training specifically just in person. But if you're Atos, if you're might be a bad example now, but you know, if you're Henzo Academy,
Mataroyo,
Gracie University,
Yeah.
and, you know, Kingsway is, I'm sure, going to come out with something, you know, eventually.
Yeah.
For their regular students, because they kind of have like their private students and their regular students.
Yeah.
But everybody is starting to, like, I mean, COVID.
Yes. Yeah.
Everybody felt a certain type of way about online jiu-jitsu, and then COVID hit.
Yes.
And everybody's like, I think we need online.
I think we need
jiu-jitsu.
online jiu-jitsu. Yes. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, I mean, what better example of why you need something like that than COVID? But yeah, it was. You were not. I remember feeling like that's refreshing that he doesn't have this, and because you were the top guy.
Yeah.
You had some guys under you that had something to say about it, but everybody still looked up to you.
Right.
You were the man, and
El Jefe.
yeah, right.
El Jefe.
Yeah, you were the general, and so, like, you know, to understand that you understand that was a good way to learn, as long as you're bringing it in
Right.
person and testing it and pressure testing it and seeing what works, what doesn't work, and practicing in
Yes.
person. Then you found the value in it. So I found it easy to approach you, and the reason why I know the time frame is because, and that we were over in Scranton MMA, is because when I saw I had already seen the advertisement for Gracie Survival Tactics on Gracie University, right? But I hadn't pulled the trigger on it yet. No pun intended for the law enforcement stuff. So I remember I saw Hero was going to be in Philadelphia, like Manny Young or something like that.
Yeah, Man Young. Yeah.
And Hero was from the DVDs and the Gracie University online courses they had. Hero was kind of like, you know, that was the guy. Henner is very entertaining, and also, and like, those guys were my coaches. I say to this day, I'm sure we'll get to it later, but I'll leave that for later. But like, I saw those guys on my television screen constantly.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because even when I was training with you full time, we were still having these lab sessions in my basement. Me and EJ, Rick Bunt, who's a black belt under you now.
Yep.
We would come and train here. We were coming at the Scranton MMA at the time is when I brought Rick Bunt in. We were in the rink side when Rick Bunt started.
Yes.
Because I had met Rick Bunt. We call him Pretty Rick here at the academy. There's two Ricks, Big Rick and Pretty Rick. Rick Bunt is Pretty Rick. For those of you listening that don't know Pretty Rick's last name, it's Bunt, B-U-N-T, Bunt, like Adam Sandler would say, right? So I met Rick Bunt through his fiance, who I was friends with, and he had heard that I did jiu-jitsu, and he, interestingly enough, had trained jiu-jitsu like 16 years prior with
Rob Kahn,
and John Burke,
Yes.
and those old school hoist guys,
Yes.
New York guys. And because Rick is from New York, and I remember I had brought Rick. I kind of got him back into the game because I told him he kind of got his feet wet by coming to my basement first. So he had heard that I was training with a bunch of my friends in my basement, started training with me in my basement first, and then, I said, well, why don't you come to the school too and join the school? And that he actually did, and the rest is history. Now he's a black belt. I'm still training, but. Like, he still liked to come. Like, so my point was, I was still training in my basement while I was training organized with you, because he would come to the school and he was like, man, I'm getting caught in this. Let's go to your basement. Like, he was obsessed.
Yes.
He was one of those. He's like me. He's very cerebral, and he always wanted to figure stuff out. And I had a knack for defense. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It just wanted to be because I got beat up a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
You learn how to defend yourself.
You got to learn how to defend yourself,
kicked,
right? And I really did subscribe to that energy efficiency philosophy, the hero, and you were a big proponent of that also. And we would always go. We called it the lab. We would go in my basement. He's like, man, this guy is catching me in this arm lock. Well, how do we? And we would come up with like defense. He's like, "Oh my God, I never thought of that." And then he would go back. And he would call me like, "That guy didn't get me with that thing. That thing worked." And so we were bouncing back and forth. So when I saw that Hero was going to be in Philly, I know I had approached you, and I asked a couple other people. They're like, "Nah," you know what I mean? And you were like, "No, I'd be interested in going to that." And we asked a couple other people, and they were like, "I don't know." So it ended up just being me and you. I didn't even know if you still wanted to go.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying, "Hey, are we going to that Hero seminar?" I'm like, "Yeah, you still want to go?" You're like, "Yeah." He's like, "You're like, as a matter of fact, I'm going to go see my daughter. She lives down there, and the reason I know the timings is your granddaughter was just born. You hadn't met her yet.
Yes, I hadn't met her yet. No.
Yeah, because your daughter lives down there.
Yes.
So I remember we went to the seminar, and we trained, and then we went literally from the seminar to your daughter's house. You met your granddaughter for the first time ever.
Yep.
I was with you.
Yes.
I met your granddaughter that same day.
Yep.
And we hung out at your daughter's house for a while. Then we went to eat, and then like on our ride home, I remember I had approached you and I had said, "Hey, listen, there's this new program on Gracie University. It's called Gracie Survival Tactics. It's specifically for law enforcement." I said, "I have an idea. I just want to run this by you." And you're like, "What's up?" I said, "Well, I'm gonna buy it." And it was back then $400. It wasn't cheap.
It's not cheap.
I mean?
Yeah, it's not cheap now.
Right. I said, "I'm gonna buy it." I said, "How do you feel about if I buy it? You know, I'll look at the techniques. I'll run them by you. You see what you think about it, and then we'll have like a law enforcement class." And you're like, "That's a great idea." Like at Scranton MMA.
Yeah.
So that was the birth of the law enforcement only class, that Thursday 4 o'clock joint.
Yeah.
Where it was only open to law enforcement.
Yes.
Right? Because at the time, again, like, you know, a lot of these, you're showing law enforcement based techniques.
Yes.
You might not want to like mix that in with the regular MMA crew.
Correct.
Not to say that anybody there was a bad guy, but it was a specific law enforcement course.
Yes.
So that's what we did. I bought the course. I ran every one of the techniques by you first. We would kind of like, I would show you like, "Hey, like this is what we should work on Thursday. What do you think about this?" And you'd be like, "Oh yeah, I like that. Maybe put a little bit of, Hoy showed me this. Maybe I would," and we kind of like, made that Thursday law enforcement class. And that was the beginning of our law enforcement only class, which later turned into a MOPEC approved law enforcement program.
Yes. Yeah.
And that which isn't Gracie Survival Tactics.
No.
It's a completely different course.
Program.
Just because you had a background in Hoist's program. We obviously had the GST material, and then we had our own stuff that we made changes
and that was
to.
my recollection of it, was like, as we would go through stuff, it would be like, "Oh, I like the way that, GST did this. I like the way Hoist did that." Like you're going, like, this is good. I like this variation of GST, but I like this variation of Hoist, and then this. And what we started to notice, though, was there was gaps.
Yeah.
Even once they were overlaid, there were some gaps in there.
Sure.
Where we didn't have answers. There was, neither program answered certain questions.
Right.
And that's where we started to just experiment. We
Yeah.
were just in the laboratory, so to speak, like, well, let's try this, let's do this, let's look at it this way. How does this coincide with policy? How does this coincide with having a firearm? How does and we started to fill in those gaps.
Stuff, yes.
We started to fill in all those little holes, and it just became its own curriculum.
Yeah.
To this day, it's still its own.
And we put in a lot of work, and it's a testament. Obviously, I was a cop.
Right.
Right. So I wanted to learn these things and come up with these things for my own benefit out there on the street. But it's a testament to you because you weren't.
I wasn't.
And you had all your other programs. Right. We're at Scranton MMA at the time. You have cage fighters. You have a boxing program. You have a striking program. You have a wrestling program. There's advanced jiu-jitsu. There's basic jiu-jitsu. You have a plethora of instructors under you. You still took the time to work on stuff that could potentially save law enforcement officers' lives.
Right.
And that was a big deal to me. I know it was a big deal to the other guys like EJ, Mark, and Wagner, and all those guys, who still felt a little bit of uncomfortableness in this gym full of all these different people because they keep things close.
Sure.
EJ, he has that resting mad face. You know what I mean? He's the nicest guy ever. But if you looked at him from 10 feet away, you think he's mad at you. And they were a little skeptical. You know. To this day, they're like, "I don't think John Schwartz liked this." I'm like, "You're wrong. He loves all you guys." You know what I mean? Like, you just got to get to know these guys. They're great. But yeah, I was always very appreciative that you took the time to go in the lab and really work on these things before we even presented it to the law enforcement class. You would kind of work it out and go from there. And that was kind of like the birth of that law enforcement only class. And we were still training regularly. Stuff too, but that kind of evolved into what we have here today at the Pennsylvania level, the local level of our Gracie NEPA LEO program that's now MOPEC certified.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was kind of the birth of it, driving back from a Hero and Gracie seminar when you literally just met your granddaughter as an infant baby for the first time.
Right.
That was
Yeah.
that was the conversation that kind of led to that.
And people ask, I get asked that a lot. They're like, you know, what is like my motivation? Obviously, your motivation was you were a police officer.
Right.
You know, people ask me, well, you know, why do you invest so much time in law enforcement, or why did you? And you know, whatever way they phrase the question, but it's because I love my community. And I don't want to see my community burned to the ground because Officer Dumbass does something
Right.
to incite a fucking riot.
And now there's riots.
And
in
now
the
there's
streets.
right.
Yes.
So it was like, it was important to me because I love my community.
Right.
And that was it. And it was like, if I can make a difference at this level of law enforcement, it can make a difference throughout the community.
Right. And that's an important distinction because it wasn't that you just wanted a couple buddy cops so you could get out of traffic
Right, no.
tickets. Right. You had, not only did you have respect for what we did out there every day, but it wasn't just, oh, I just support the cops so I could have a couple cop buddies. You were concerned about the community as well.
Yeah, my whole thing was, you know, because at that time, right, there was a lot going on with,
Oh, my God.
right? It was all cops are bastards, right? Like there was a lot of hate.
Yeah.
And, you know, for me, I'm always don't come to me with a problem if you don't have a solution.
Right.
So I would hear all of these people bitching online and bitching in person and, you know, running it down. What's your bitching doing? It's making fucking problems worse.
Right.
It's making things worse. Figure out a solution.
Yeah.
So I said, here's my solution to this, you know, and maybe it would never work, but it did.
Right.
Again, now we have a program that's MOPEC certified. You know, we teach officers from all over the state, and it worked.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Now, does every officer train? No. You
No.
should.
Right. You should.
You should be training.
Right.
But you can't save everybody.
No.
Can't save.
No. You could lead a horse to water, right?
Yeah, can't save everybody. And that's, you know, that's even as a general rule of thumb, because I used to get, you know, pivoting off of this a little bit, but, you know, I used to get very butthurt when people would quit jiu-jitsu. I'd be like, why is this guy quitting jiu-jitsu? Like, what's wrong? And I would get angry on some level, like, you know, or dad disappointment or something.
Yeah.
You know, like, you loser, you
Yeah.
quitter, like,
Sissy.
you know, and then I started to
Yeah.
realize, like, you can't save everybody. Can't do it. So I was in, you know, that was pulling energy away from me that I could be putting into somebody who is training.
Right.
You know, why am I putting this negative energy over here when I could take that energy and put it positively over here? And that was really the whole thing with the law enforcement. It was like, hey, I want to make a difference for my community. And I don't want to talk about it. I want to be about it.
Right. Right. Yeah. You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution.
Yeah.
And you just chose
Yes.
to be part of the solution.
Part of the solution. Yeah.
Yeah, and we ran that for a very long time, that law enforcement only class, because that started in Scranton MMA, but then that transferred
Over to Kaiser Avenue.
to Kaiser
Yeah.
Avenue.
Yeah.
And then that, you know, and it maintained there. We don't currently now at this location have a law enforcement only class, like a weekly class, but it's kind of evolved into our MOPEC certified training programs.
Right. Yes.
Which we have our week-long certification course, and then we also have our daily certification courses, our 1-day blocks.
Yes.
That we just got approved and stuff like that too. So it kind of evolved into that, but at the time it was basically a training, like you said, like we were in the lab,
Yes.
trying to figure out what could work. What we have to, we say it all the time as far as law enforcement, jiu-jitsu. I mean, there was a time, and we say this in GST also, there's a time where jiu-jitsu was taught to law enforcement,
Yes.
all right? But now there are programs, GST included, your program included,
Yes.
where now those are programs for law
Yes.
enforcement.
Yes.
And that's two different things.
Two different things. Two different things.
Now, am I saying that if you're a police officer and you go to a regular jiu-jitsu school and become proficient in jiu-jitsu, will that help you out there? Certainly.
Yes.
Better than doing nothing.
Correct. Yes.
However, you have to have, you have to be cognizant that there's a weapon now in every fight.
Yes.
Because, at least one.
Yes.
Because you
You
brought
have it.
one there,
Yes.
right? You have it on your person.
Yes.
So there's at least one. Maybe they have one too, but there's at least one firearm, if not multiple weapons, tasers, pocket knives. There's weapons in that fight now
Yes.
because you brought them there. So there's you have to be considerate of weapon retention. distance management, of course, is in regular jiu-jitsu, but it's even more important for distance and cover and stuff like that for law enforcement. So it's a little bit different.
It is.
It's a little bit different.
It is. Here, and this will ruffle feathers. Every time I say this ruffles feathers, right?
Not you.
No, not
You
me.
never ruffle
I'm not
feathers.
polarizing at all. Most people who think they are training jiu-jitsu are not training jiu-jitsu. They are training sport grappling.
Sport grappling is the term we like to use.
You're training sport grappling. If you're training jiu-jitsu, you are training to deal with strikes and firearms and knives and improvised weapons
and headlocks and clothing grabs
and
Yes.
somebody jumping out of your bathroom closet while you're taking a shit
Right.
and jumping on you, right?
Right.
It's not
When do we learn that defense?
right.
No, I'm just
Yes,
kidding.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
like it's so.
You know my stomach. I'm on the toilet.
Right. Yeah, it's maddening to me when people are like, "Oh yeah, I do jujitsu." Oh, you do jujitsu? Okay, and then you start to find out they do sport grappling.
Right.
It's sport grappling. Okay, so that's. I'll get some hate in the comment section for that.
Well, I'll tell you what.
But that to me is jujitsu. That's the way I was brought up under Hoist, right?
Yeah.
Hoist was like, it's a fight. It's not. This isn't.
Right.
This is a fight, and you might have to deal with being stabbed or, potentially being shot at or something. Like it's a fight.
Yeah, and you were always like that. You were always a very a core jiu-jitsu for self-defense guy. I mean, obviously you came up under Hoist, and I'll never forget this. About a year ago, I was with Alan Manganello, and you've heard me talk about
Yes,
Alan
yeah.
Manganello in our personal conversations. Alan Manganello is a 5th degree black belt under Henner and Hiron Gracie. He came up under Hickson and Pedro Sauer.
Okay.
So he was with Hickson for a while. When Hickson lost his son, actually Alan Manganello used to train with Hickson's son that passed away. Was it Hoxton? Hoxton Gracie. That was one of Alan Manganello's training partners when he would go and train with Hickson in California. And when Hoxton passed away, Hickson stopped teaching for a while. So Alan didn't have a master at that point
Right.
because Hickson just stopped teaching.
Yeah.
So that's when he went to Pedro Sauer. Obviously, Pedro Sauer is a purist, coming up under with
Yes.
and under the Gracies.
Yes.
So then Alan got a black belt from Pedro, and then transferred over to Henner on Hero and Gracie. Became involved with Gracie Survival Tactics as an instructor for Henner on Hero and Gracie, because now Gracie Survival Tactics isn't like it used to be, like we were speaking of. You cannot just buy that course
Right.
Off the internet. You have to go in person to an instructor certification course if you want to learn it. They actually don't even have a participant level course. It's an instructor certification course. So now you have to go in person. And it used to be Henner and Hero were the only two people that taught that class. And there was only a few of them a year. But because it started to grow legs and there was more frequent all over the country, they started employing instructors.
Right.
And they're very smart in selecting who they hire, because a lot of them are not only very good at jiu-jitsu, black belt instructors, but they're ex-law enforcement.
Yeah.
And Alan did, I believe it was 23 or 24 years with the Louisville Metropolitan Police Department. And so he became one of the Gracie Survival Tactics Master Instructors, and he was actually my evaluator. So during my time with the state police, I ended up Mikey Carroll. You know
Yes.
Mikey Carroll.
Yeah.
He's a retired major from the Pennsylvania State Police. Me and Mikey were troopers together at Honesdale back when he was a trooper and I was a trooper, and we've been friends basically our whole career. Mikey rose through the ranks. First of all, one of the best representations of the Pennsylvania State Police
Oh God, yeah.
you could ever have.
Humanity. One of the best
Humanity
representations
in general,
of
one of
humanity
the best
in general,
human beings
yes.
I've ever met.
Yes.
But if you had a poster
Yeah.
for what a Pennsylvania State Police trooper is supposed to be, not only like looking but doing.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
It wasn't all
Yeah.
about just looking the part.
Right.
He did the part.
He did the work,
It's Mikey
yes.
Carroll. I always tease him, say if you were just a little bit taller, they would have made posters. Mike's like,
He's
and
my
Mike,
height.
He'll enjoy
Yeah,
that.
he's
one,
my
right?
height.
Oh, you can never get Mike on anything. He was the perfect trooper. The only thing you can make fun of Mike is that he was short.
Right.
So that's what me and my buddy Rob Hadley, Bo Hadley. Anytime Mike would yell at us, or because he end up becoming our boss, and we would just resort to short jokes because he's the perfect trooper,
Yes.
right? But Mike actually, he started an on-duty defensive tactics training. It was during all like the civil disorder stuff.
Yes,
Right?
yeah.
All the riots and stuff like that. And we had civil disorder training. So he basically started a close quarters basically what it was
Jiu-Jitsu, yeah.
Jiu-Jitsu,
Yeah.
on duty, right?
Yeah.
And he asked me to become involved in it because he knew I trained with you, and now I was on my hiatus from here,
Yeah.
at the time, but he knew I had a background in Jiu-Jitsu, was a purple belt at the time, and he knew I had a background with specifically Gracie survival tactics. I had talked to him about it before and stuff like that, so he had brought me in, but I wasn't certified in it. I had still been only training off the one that I bought, the physical,
Right.
or the digital program that I bought for $400 when me and you started that thing. So it came to a point where I was teaching on duty other troopers from across the Northeast region. And I remember we were training in like a baseball batting cage facility. Right across from the Troop N Hazleton headquarters, there's a baseball training facility owned by a gentleman who was a very, very prolific baseball player growing up. He played college ball and then became a state trooper. So he loaned that training facility to us to hold these trainings. But we were
Yeah.
literally training on AstroTurf.
Yeah.
I remember I would shake my sneakers out, and I would I have big ears, so I would like shake my ears out like the turf.
The
beads
turf
would
would,
fall.
yeah.
We were literally grappling on AstroTurf, and I called one of my other friends who was high up in the state police at the time, Billy Cawley. He's retired now, and I said, "Now we're training in this like on AstroTurf. We have a Northeast Training Center that just got built, a new one. They're supposedly getting mats. Why can't we just train there?" And I'll never forget. He said, "Chuck, I know who you are. I know what you can do. I trained." Billy was one of the guys who used to come as a young corporal and train in my basement. Right now, I'm talking to Captain Cawley. He eventually retired as a major.
Yeah.
Right. But he would train. He would come for probably a good 6-8 months. He would come in my basement and train jiu-jitsu. He had a gi and everything, right? So I'm on the phone with him. I'm like, so he's like, "Chuck, I know what you can do. I know your background. But if one of our troopers uses this on the road and we get sued,
Yeah.
you're going to go to court. And they're going to ask the trooper, where did you learn this?" And then you say, "I learned it from Corporal Chuck Maiorana." Who is Corporal Chuck Maiorana? He's a patrol corporal. Oh, is he an instructor with your department? No.
Right.
Okay, well, what is he teaching you? He's teaching us Gracie survival tactics. Well, is he certified in that program? No.
Right.
So, like, here's me just thinking I'm going to call my buddy Billy and call in a favor, like, "Hey, bro,
Yeah.
let's move to the training facility." Not looking it through the lens of a captain in the Pennsylvania State Police
Right.
who deals with litigation and
Yes,
stuff like
yes.
that. I'm a street guy, I'm from the streets.
Yeah.
I'm a street corporal, you know what I
Yes.
mean? Like, I don't think about stuff. I don't have to think about stuff.
It's not your job to.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm there teaching guys the material. Right. That's what I do. So it really hit home, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. I don't want to hang anybody out to dry. I don't want to see anybody get in trouble. I don't see the department get in trouble. I'm like, "What do you want me to do?" He's like, "Well, I want you to do two things. I want you to go get certified in instructor development, which is a program in the Pennsylvania State Police that teaches you how to be a better instructor. Not necessarily for martial arts.
Right, just
but in general.
in general,
right? And I also want you to go get certified in this stuff. Right? Go get a piece of paper saying that you're a Gracie survival tactics instructor." So I did. I went to the first instructor development course. He got me in it because he was in charge of the training and education. It's a very tight class. There's only 10 people. They won't put more than 10 people in this class. You have to do speeches. There's like a half-hour speech, it's a 10-minute speech, it's a 15-minute speech. If the class is too big, that class would take 2
forever,
months,
yeah.
right? So there's only 10 people in class. He gets me in the very next one. Pulls some strings, gets me in there. We're retired now, I can say that. I don't know if he really pulled strings if there was an opening. But he got me in the very next one, and it's hard to get into. Did great in that class, and then he sends me off to get certified in Gracie survival tactics. And the instructor in that course was a guy named Evandro Nunez, who's pretty controversial right now in this
In the
topic,
jiu-jitsu
but
community,
that's not
yeah.
for us to talk
Right,
about
yeah.
right now, right?
Yeah.
At the time, he was the head instructor in the program. Now, this is 2022. We had bought that program, and this is why I know the dates. We had bought that program in 2012.
Yeah.
When was your daughter born?
My daughter was born in.
Or I'm sorry, not your daughter, your
my
granddaughter, the one
was
that we saw in
born
Philadelphia.
2000. No,
No,
she was not.
It was 12 or 13.
12.
Right.
Yes, 12.
That's why I know
Yes.
this timeline.
Yes.
That's when the Gracie survival tactics came out. because I told you on the way home, I'm saying, let's buy this or I'll buy the program. You vet the techniques, and we'll teach a law enforcement class, right? And so I had been training and teaching.
Yes.
Because at some point I had taken over that class.
Yes.
You would kind of like, you were teaching it because I was showing you what I had seen online. You're like, yeah, I like that part, but I'm going to change it to this part. You were doing your own thing, but you were still teaching a law enforcement only class. But then it came to a point where you were like, why don't you teach today?
Yeah.
And sometimes you would be there and
Yes.
you were watching me. I didn't know at the time, but you're watching me teach, and you're helping me develop as an instructor, without saying you're going to be an instructor. Right. You're just watching me, and then eventually it came to the point where sometimes I would just take the class. You weren't even there.
Yes.
Right. You had trusted me with actually running the class. So at the time that I go get certified in Gracie Survival Tactics in person, I had been teaching and training GST for 10 years. Yeah. A decade.
Yeah.
So like the second day, this is a week-long course, Monday through Friday, and the second day of this course, the head instructor, Evandro Nunez, he pulls me to the side on a break, and he says, how do you know all this stuff already? Because he's walking around. When they teach you a move, and then you drill.
Yeah.
And they walk around, and they watch you and your partner, and not only is he seeing me performing the techniques after only seeing it for the first time, like pretty proficiently, he's actually hearing me coach my partner who had zero experience.
Right.
So he's hearing the terminology I'm saying. He's like watching me go monkey grip, seize push, monkeys pull. He's hearing these things come out of my mouth because I'm helping my training partner. So he pulls me aside. He's like, how do you know this stuff already? And I explained it to him. Yeah. Listen, I bought Gracie Survival Tactics back when you could buy it off the internet. I don't even know if he knew about that. Right. That you could, because he came after the fact. And he's like, oh my God, that's really cool. This is like Tuesday afternoon. The class just started on Monday. He's like, okay. And he had a little sidebar conversation, 3-4 minute conversation, and that was it. So the next day comes, it's Wednesday, and I remember we went to lunch. And I remember he was kneeling on the mat, and everybody was like kind of on the edge of the mat, just eating their protein bars or whatever they had to bring with them. And he calls me up, he goes, Chuck, come here, because they learn your names, right? Sure, yeah. And he knew my name, and he goes, come here, and he's kneeling down on the mat, and he's on his cell phone. And I walk onto the mat, he called me over, he's the instructor, and I'm standing there, he's not saying nothing to me. And I'm thinking to myself, how rude. Like that, my thought process is, you called me, like, the sixth ward in me is like, bro, you called me over here to talk, and now you're not even looking at me, and you're staring at your phone. Right. I don't know, what do I know? I don't know how these guys act, I don't know if he's on Instagram, I don't know if he's texting his wife, I don't know what it is. And it's like an uncomfortable, 8-second pause where I'm standing there. He called me over. I'm standing there. He's not saying nothing. He's just kneeling on the mat. I'm standing over him, and he goes, and he hands me his phone, and he says, how does this look? And as I'm reading it, I'm like, it's like, I still have it. It's like, I found a guy in Pennsylvania who speaks your language perfectly and knows the GS techniques and been training GST since it came out, and really knows and he's like saying your and you, and really talks like you guys, and I'm like, what is, and I get down to it, and I realize it's to Henner Gracie. So here's Evandro had drafted an email saying that he found me in Pennsylvania, and that I'm 2 years away from retirement, or a little bit more than 2 years away from retirement at that point, and that this might be someone you might want to contact in the future to maybe recruit them onto the instructor cadre. Right. Yeah. He's like, is that okay? I'm like, he's like, is this to? I'm like, is that to Henner Gracie? Because again, I've been seeing Henner Gracie on my TV. To me, you go to Walmart and ask 10 people who Henner Gracie is, maybe nobody knows, right? But to me, to you, to people in the community, Henner Gracie's like a celebrity. Yes. Right? Yeah. So I'm like, this is, and now he's laughing. He's like, yes, Chuck, that's real. It's a real email to Henner Gracie. Yes, it's real. Calm down. Yeah. It's real. I'm like, yeah, of course I'm okay with it. I'm honored that you even think to send that email, right? And so he sends it off. He's like, okay, thanks. And I'm like reeling now. And now throughout the course of the rest of the course, he's using me as his uke. He's using me. He's using me a little bit more than his assistant instructor, who, at the time was on the instructor cadre. I don't think he's no longer on the cadre, but now he's using me even and now people in the class know my name. Right. It was a small class, 25 people. The But now people in the class are like he's referring to me and this and that, almost like I'm part of the team already.
Right, yeah.
And he's giving me like almost too much credit.
Yeah.
And so then he shows me like the response in the morning. The next morning he's like, hey, look, or it might have been later that day, like Hannah responded. And it said like he had Luke Charlie Fernandez as who is the director for Gracie Survival Tactics. He takes care of all the hiring and all that stuff and the scheduling. He had Luke Charlie Fernandez into the email thread and said, okay, Charlie, get this, keep this guy's information, because Evandro had asked me for my email, my cell phone number, my full name, my agency, all that stuff. He said, keep this guy in mind. And that was basically like, my recruitment.
Right.
Now, I didn't hear anything for about a year and a half later, but my point of that whole story was, if it wasn't for Billy Cawley telling me you had to go get certified in this stuff, then I never go to that class, because I'm thinking, I know this stuff.
Right, I know.
I've been doing it for a decade.
Right, yes.
I've been teaching it and training it for a decade. I'm teaching it right now. Like, what do we got to go through all this paperwork stuff for? Like, what do I got to leave for a week and go here or go there? And I just didn't, I was naive, right? And I wasn't looking at it through that organizational lens that Billy Cawley had.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy how things work, because if I don't go to that course, now, I'm sure we'll get to this story at some point during these podcasts. I don't know if it's going to be this one or a future one, probably a future one. But I had taken a 5-year hiatus, or at the time I was gone from this school.
Yeah.
In 2017, I was a purple belt. I got my purple belt in 2014 from you and Rob Kahn. Trained for another 3 years. And like you had said before, and I'll tie all this back up in a second, but like you had said before, that was during those years where there was some stuff going on in the nation with law enforcement.
Yeah.
There
lot of stuff.
There was a lot of stuff going on, and there was an attitude from the public that all cops were bad.
Yes.
And, you know, when you're in it, you just keep going. You just keep trudging along day by day. You try to help people. You try to do your job. You don't really think much about it. Thinking back on it, it weighed on me.
Yeah.
Right? It was a lot. And jiu-jitsu was like where I went to like, I love jiu-jitsu. I love the science of it. I love the cerebralness. I love the physical workout. I just want to be here to have fun. I like my training partners. I want to forget about that. The society hates me, even though I'm trying to help, and that I'm a police officer and I got a ton of years left. I just want to forget about that for an hour.
Yeah.
Right? And there were some things that had transpired in the gym, and the environment was actually even getting more stressful inside the training room,
yes,
than outside in the street. And
Yeah.
it was like the combination of everything. And there was a specific thing that happened, and we'll get into it in a later episode. Maybe we can bring that guy in.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it
Yeah.
together.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that'll be fun, because
Yeah.
me and him are great at this point.
Yes.
And good friends.
Yes.
Just talk to him. But basically, something had happened between me and another high-level instructor at the time, and I walked away from the gym. I couldn't deal with people scrutinizing from the outside, me as a police officer, and I also couldn't deal with it coming from that angle. And this person might not even have known what I was going through at the time.
Right.
Right? It was a perfect storm, and I'm like, you know what? I'm out. And I messaged you and thanked you for everything, but like, I'm at a point where I'm just gonna, for my own purposes, I'm not trying to take anybody else with me. Me, Chuck, I'm out.
Yeah.
And that was like 5 years out, or that was in 2017. So now fast forward to 2022, where I'm at this certification course. And lo and behold, there's about 10 people in that class that are currently training with you.
Yes.
I don't know this at the time. I'm out of the game.
Yeah.
Right? But they're hearing Chuck so much during this class because of the head instructor who's involving me. And he's asking, what rank? I'm a purple belt and blah, blah, blah. And then guys are coming up to me on the break. It was a weird thing.
Right.
I'm just a student like everybody else, but they're coming up to me and like, where do you train? I'm like, I don't. And they're like, what do you mean you don't? You said you're a purple belt. Now, because I was reluctant to talk about it.
Right, yeah.
Right? Because it's not for me. I'm not trying to make a big deal out of it. I left for my own reasons, and that's it. It was only for me. It wasn't for anybody else.
Right.
I never bashed the school.
Yes.
I was recruited by your competitors, which you know now. You didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
I was recruited to go teach at a very, what do I want to say, rival school.
Yes.
I declined that offer because I did not leave to hurt you or the business. I left my own personal reasons. Right. So I just didn't like talking about it. And then I'll never forget, like, a couple people were asking me where I trained, and I said Gracie and they're like, that's where I train. I'm like, oh, you train now? You're like, yeah, but Jeff? Yeah, I'm like, I know Jeff very well. In fact, I stayed, and we had always stayed in contact.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not like you didn't hear from me for 5 years. We would text back and forth.
Yeah.
It wasn't every day like it is now, but you know, we stayed in contact. We were friends off the mat.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm not a big texter.
No. But,
Anybody who's watching knows I'm
right.
not.
Yeah.
You might go an hour, 2, 3, maybe a day without hearing from me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes we would talk on the phone.
Yeah.
Right. Because we're from an era where that used to happen.
Yes.
We used to call each other on the phone.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, it was weird, and it was like, I had always like wondered, like, do these guys now instantly hate me? Like, because in my mind, like, oh, they heard this, like, and then I'm like, who am I? They probably don't even know who I am. You know what I mean? Like, so like, I'll never forget. It was like Matt Duranic, which is one of our students. He trains at Bad Company, which is in our network.
Probably Jeff Ramirez.
Jeff Ramirez was there. Yeah. I could pull up. I'd have to pull up the picture, but there was a good group. I'm trying to think. Mike Pavir.
Yeah.
Who was a brown belt.
Yep.
He had just gotten his brown belt at the time, as a matter of fact. Because I remember talking to him. And I remember coming back from, it was coming back from one of the days. This is like Thursday now. So I'd already had some sidebar conversations with these guys. And I park in the parking lot, and I'm walking in, and who's getting out of his truck but Mike Pavir. Mm-hmm. And just a great guy.
Yes.
Mike's a super nice guy, and we're walking into the course together, and I hadn't really like expanded on what happened. And he had told me that he trained at Bad Company, and I had heard over the years that Tyler had opened his own school,
right.
Tyler Calvi, which was your first black belt. He had opened his own academy under the Gracie Nipa banner, but it was his own school. He was the head instructor there. So I had heard that he had been training there, and you know, most of our audience knows this. Tyler was the person I had the problem with.
Yes. That
I walked away, and
right.
Tyler, you know, I'm sure has talked about this to some people. Me and Tyler are completely fine at this point in time. We talk. He just called me a couple weeks ago. We had like an hour and a half long conversation. We're friends. We've mended ways. Everything is great. But that's what the issue at the time was with him. And now I learned on this walk into the training facility that Mike is training with Tyler.
Yeah.
So I don't know what Mike thinks of me.
Right.
At this point, I think in my head, what my
we conjure stuff in our head.
Right.
That's not real.
I'm thinking Mike went to class and told Tyler, this Chuck guy's in my GST class, and you know, and now I'm thinking Tyler's telling him, well, that's the asshole, that blah blah blah. And so now I don't know what Mike Pavir thinks of me.
Right.
So now we're walking in, and I'll never forget this. Like, he was super cool.
Yeah.
And I'm like, now I'm thinking, because of the way my head's working, I'm like, Mike, you probably have heard like what was going on, but the problem was with Tyler and stuff like that. And you know, listen, I got nothing against the guy, and you know, I wish him the best. And I really was like, I never really had a person. The beef I had with him at the time, it was what it is. I walked away, but it's not like I sat at home like lighting candles,
right?
Voodoo dolls of Tyler Calvi. Well, that's not what it was, right? It's just I had enough at the time. It had gotten toxic.
Yes.
You know what I mean, and that was it. So, I remember him saying like, "Nah, man, like, I think you should come back. Like, I haven't heard anything bad. You know what I mean? And I think you should come back." And I'm like, "Nah, I don't think." Like, I kind of just brushed it off. And like, but I remember like playing it off here.
Yeah.
But in here, I was like, man, that's cool of him to even say, especially if he's like one of Tyler's guys, brown belt, like guy's been around.
Yeah.
It's not like he hasn't heard the stories or, you know, been through it on the mat and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool of him to say. And then I'll never forget it. I'm going to probably get emotional about this now, but I'll never forget it. On Friday, they take pictures, and at the end of a GST, they'll take a big group picture of everybody that's in the class, and then they'll say, if you want to stick around, and I know this now because I'm one of the instructors,
right?
But they'll say, if you want to stick around with us, the two instructors, you can take individual pictures with us, or you could take department pictures. Like if you're all there from Wilkes-Barre PD,
gotcha.
If there's 6 of you from Wilkes-Barre PD, the 6 of you can take a picture with the instructor so you can hang it up in your station or something.
Right, yeah, I gotcha.
So I remember standing in line. I got my individual picture with them. And I remember like the Wilkes-Barre guys took their picture with him, the Wilkes-Barre Township guys took their picture with him, all the PDs that were there together. And then they said, hey, we're going to take a Gracie Nipa picture, right, together.
Yeah.
And I had talked to these guys throughout the week.
But they all had their rash guards on, right? Like their Gracie. Most of them did.
Well, no, we had our T-shirts on because you have to take
yeah.
the picture with the
T-shirt
graduation T-shirt.
Okay.
So you get a T-shirt at the end of the GST course. You wear that T-shirt for the picture.
Okay.
Right. So we all had our GST T-shirts on, and I remember them saying it was like Jeff Ramirez, Matt. It was Mike Pavir. There was another guy, Scott. Remember Scott? Bald Scott, older guy.
I'm drawing a blank.
If I showed you the picture, you'd know him.
Yeah, I'd pick everybody out of the picture.
Immediately.
Yeah.
But there was like a bunch of them. I'll never forget, I overheard them say, let's do a Gracie Nipa picture. So I start walking away.
Yeah.
Because I'm not, in my mind, I'm not part of that
Right,
anymore.
right.
Because I had left. And I would never forget, they're like, Chuck! They see me walk away. They're like, Chuck, come on. I'm like, nah, man. Like, nah, you guys are good.
Yeah.
Like, no, you guys they're like, we are not taking this picture until you come up here.
Yeah.
And that moved me.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, that was in July.
Yeah.
And I went home. They all said, bro, you need to come back. We
Yeah.
saw you this week. I mean, obviously, you know your stuff. You need to come back. You need to come back. How do you stop at purple belt? You got to come back, blah, 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 this, that, and the other thing. And I just laughed it off like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, I've been there, done that, I did that. I'm still friends with Jeff. Tell Jeff I said hello, but I'll tell Jeff I said hello because I talked to him.
Right, yeah.
You know, I got nothing against you guys. I'm super pumped that you guys are training.
Yeah.
Cops, training, I love it. You know, Gracie Nipa, great. I said, but and they're like, nope, you're Gracie Nipa. You take the picture with us.
Yeah.
And I jumped into the picture. I did, and I have the picture to this
Yeah.
day. And I just thought about that every night. This is July now, right? And I'm thinking, man, like that could have went so differently.
Right.
That could have been like them mean mugging me, like,
Yeah.
guy quit.
Yeah.
Like, whatever, man. We're Gracie Nipa, you're not.
Yeah.
It could have went like that,
Yeah.
right? You know how, jiu-jitsu guys could be and fighters and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, that's crazy how welcoming they were, how inclusive they were.
Yeah.
And
I
that
spoke
conversation with Mike in the parking
Yeah.
lot, and so, man, I thought about it a long time. I might even have sent you that picture.
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah.
And you're like, when
Yeah.
you coming back? You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I probably did say when
yeah.
you're coming back, pussy.
Yeah, and I'm like, I just like laughed.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So I never answered you. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And, and I'm like, and you're like, oh, but you were like, no, that's cool that you went to that and
Yeah.
stuff like that and whatever, right? So, and then like that's July now, and I'll never forget. I had caught wind that you were doing a law enforcement, like a 2-hour law enforcement free
Yes.
course on like a Sunday.
Yeah.
I had never stepped foot in this place.
Yeah.
In fact, from the time I walked out of Gracie Nipa, which was you were still at
Kaiser Avenue. Yeah. Yeah.
I had never stepped back in Kaiser or here ever again
Yeah.
at that point. So now it's 2022 and now it's October. You were running that law enforcement
Yeah.
class in October. And there were a couple of times I'm like, I'm going to show up today, and then I'd be like, no, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm going to show up next week. I'm not sure. And then someone told me about that law enforcement class, and I'm like, I might even have had like Mike Pavir's number at that point, and we might have exchanged numbers. I don't know if it was him that said, hey, you should come to this, or maybe it was EJ was coming to it. And he was like, hey, what do you think about this? And I had obviously told EJ the story about
Yeah.
the course, and EJ was coming to my weekly trainings at the state police and stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to go, And I didn't tell you,
Right.
And he's like, you're going to go? He's like, I'll go too. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go. He's like, you're going to tell Jeff? I'm like, nope. And I just walked in the door that day, and that was like October of 22. Now I had left. It's not like I could forget. I left in Christmas of 2017.
17. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was literally almost 5 years.
Right.
A couple months shy of 5 years. I remember I walked in, and you're like, yo, look at this guy. Right? And not only did you welcome me in after 5 years of radio silence, as far as not personal friendship contact, but being on the mat, right? But you used me heavily, and I don't know if this was, maybe you could answer this, but I don't know if this was purposeful or not, but you used me during that seminar as your uke.
Yes.
A guy
Yeah.
who hasn't been on the mat in 5 years.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
other guys that were in that class that were your students that you could have used.
Right.
Right? But you used me
Yes.
as your uke while you showed the techniques, and that meant a lot to me, whether you know that or not. that right, like I didn't know if I was going to be like, you were just going to be like, oh, what's up? You know what I mean? Or like, you know, I know you had nothing personally, but
Right.
but you know, Coach Jeff is different than regular Jeff.
Yeah,
right?
very different.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Very
so I was wondering, and not only did that happen, but then we did like an around the room drill at the end, and I did like
Yes.
decent for
Yeah.
being off the couch because I hadn't sparred in 5 years. Now I've been teaching troopers GST
Right.
in the absence,
Yes.
but I hadn't sparred.
Right.
So like there was like a mount control drill where like if you're
Yeah,
on the
we're
bottom,
doing
you got to
mount,
get out.
yes.
If you're on the top, you had to control the top and not let the bottom person get on. And I never forget, I went around there and there were some young guns in
Yeah,
the class
there were,
too.
yeah, yeah.
I'll never forget, like when I was on top, nobody got out, and when
Yeah.
I was on bottom, I escaped everybody. I'm
Yeah.
like, man, this is where I need. I belong here.
Right.
You know, not only
Yeah.
did I feel I belong here because you used me, but like it kind of like all came back to me like riding a bike. Not to say I was still rusty.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But I did better than I thought it would coming off 5 years like on the bench.
Yeah.
And that basically marked my return to Gracie Nepo.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I would have never, if I never get asked by Mikey Carroll to help out with that course,
Yeah.
if I never get told by Billy Call to go get certified,
Right.
if I never
Yes.
meet those guys at that
It's
course
dominoes.
who train under you,
Yes.
who knows if I ever come back to jiu-jitsu?
Yes. Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now not only am I still been training steadily since 22 when I came back, but now, you know, I came back as a purple belt. I'm now a black belt under you,
Yep.
and now I'm a Gracie Survival Tactics. They recruited me onto that team.
Yes.
So in
Yeah.
addition to being one of the head instructors in our program, in our local Pennsylvania program, I also now official Gracie Survival Tactics instructor, teaching all over the country for Henry and Hero and Gracie for Gracie Survival Tactics branch of Gracie University. And then just recently, they just promoted me to master instructor. So I got into the company as an assistant, as an uke, traveling around with all the master instructors. That's Alan Manganello. That's kind of how we're wrapping this up. And it kind of went off on the tangent, but I'll bring it back to the Alan thing. And so now I'm working for them in that capacity, master instructor. My first lead is in July in Santa Barbara, California. Traveling all over the country teaching with them. But if it wasn't for that chain of events, I never come back here. I never get my black belt. I never, you know, have my contribution. I mean, I'm an instructor here. I'm a training partner here. My main goal is to help everybody here.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I missed sharing jiu-jitsu and helping other people. I'm 51 years old. I'll be 52 in September. I'm not going for the Abu Dhabi World
I
Championship
say that
at
all the
black
time.
belt, right?
Right, yeah.
My love of jiu-jitsu is I love to teach it. I love to train it. I still have that cerebral, I want to figure this puzzle out, right? I still like training with the young guys, seeing where I'm at as an older guy, right? But my love is to help our teammates get better.
Yeah.
And I know that's one of your biggest things too, and that you champion that with our whole team is,
Yes.
you know, you don't just be selfish with your own jiu-jitsu, you want to help everybody get better, and that's obviously what I love to do. But it's just crazy how, like you said, the dominoes fall and everything happens for a reason. If all those things don't transpire, I'm not back here today. I'm not sitting here with you right now.
Right.
I'm not a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I'm not on the GST cadre. None of that happens. And the reason why that all spun is because I brought up Al Manganello and what you were talking about as far as sport grappling versus jiu-jitsu. I remember I was talking about you to Alan on one of my GST trips. And it's to the point now where they feel like they know you and you feel like they know him,
Right.
know them.
Know them,
Because
yeah.
I talk
Yeah.
about them as much, so much to you that you feel like you know them.
Right.
And I talk about you so much to them that they feel like they know you.
Yeah.
And they don't look at I'll tell you this right now, we are not in the Gracie University system. We are
Right.
not a certified training center.
Correct.
We're our own thing,
Yes.
right? And I was nervous about how that would be, and they are super welcoming and like they respect you through me already.
Right.
They know your history through me telling them, and you know they already said, like, we could tell Jeff must be like a really great guy because we know you're a great guy, and we hear how you speak
Yeah.
about Jeff.
Yeah.
They've told me, like, if Jeff, you know, could call us anytime, we would talk to Jeff. Alan has told me if Jeff ever came to Kentucky, he could stay in my house just because how highly you speak of him.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And the reason I brought Alan up is because you were talking about the difference between sport grappling and jiu-jitsu.
And jiu-jitsu, yes.
I remember I was talking about you to Alan Manganello, and I said something like, "Oh, Jeff is really good with the self-defense stuff."
Yeah.
And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "The self-defense stuff, you know." He's like, "No, I don't know." I'm like, "The self-defense," and now I understand.
Right. You understand
that
what he's saying.
What he's saying.
Yeah.
He's looking at me in
Yeah.
a way like, "What do you mean, self-defense stuff?"
Right.
And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "There is no self-defense stuff.
Right.
Jiu-Jitsu is self-defense.
Yes.
Sport grappling might not be."
Correct.
And I don't know if he used exactly sport grappling like you do, but he's like, you know, the sportive stuff may not be self-defense. But if you say Jiu-Jitsu, that term means, especially Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or Brazilian, that term means self-defense.
Yes.
You do not, he basically yelled at me in like a playful way.
Right.
You don't distinguish
Right.
self-defense stuff and Jiu-Jitsu.
Right.
Jiu-Jitsu
Is
is
self-defense,
self-defense. Now, if
yeah.
you want to separate something, then you separate the sport grappling stuff.
Yes.
But you can never separate self-defense and Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes.
And that's what you were saying.
Yes,
Sorry
correct.
about the tangent.
Yeah. No, but that's what we do when we conversate. I don't know where we at on time. I don't want to go a 3-hour pod. I mean, we could go 3 hours.
Right now we're at noon.
Right at noon. Oh,
Yeah, we probably started about 10:25,
Yeah,
10:30.
yeah, we'll start wrapping up shortly. But a couple of times in the story, like it was, you know, you came back to like, you know, the way the guys treated you when they saw you at GST,
Yes.
right? And the community of like saying, oh, you know, Jeff can sleep on my couch, right? All of these things, and that's really one of these things that I feel like sets Gracie NEPA apart from all other academies in this area, is that community, right? Because everybody's like, oh, we're a community, we're a family,
Right.
What people forget is I've trained with everybody.
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 Let's throw some out there.
There's nobody I have not trained with.
I
Okay.
mean, you came up under Hoist.
Right.
You
Yes.
trained with Rob. You've trained Rob Kahn, which is Hoist's first American black
Yes.
belt. Rodrigo.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
throw some out there.
Enter, Hira, like we can
Right.
name Pedro Sauer, you know, so we can name drop all day. But
All day.
I'm specifically talking about I've trained with everybody in this area.
Oh,
right?
of course.
Everybody in this
Of
area,
course.
I've trained with, right? So I know them. And you know, everybody's like, "Oh, we're a family, we're a community, we're this, because it's marketing. It's marketing,
Right.
Right? And it's not the case. Well, you know, there's cliques, and
Of course.
there's divisions, and there's derisions, and like there's so much drama in these other academies, right? And that does not exist here. There's
does
no
not.
cliques here. Now, do you develop friendships with certain people over other people? Yeah, but again, everybody.
humanity.
That's humanity, right?
Right.
But everybody wants to help the next person get better. And I'm not just talking on the mat, man. Like, and I'm not going to say names or drop, you know, but a little bit out of school, like people sometimes don't see what happens outside these four walls, right?
Right.
Like, Coach Jeff only exists inside these four walls, right? Outside these four walls, in most people's head, I don't exist, right? Because
Right.
this is where you see me.
Yeah.
But you know, people through the years, people don't understand where you know and when I say we, like a few of us within the academy, you know, where we've gotten together and you know gotten somebody a hotel room that was in a bad domestic situation,
Yeah.
got people into the mental health system who were you know on the verge of suicide. Got people squared away with housing when they were on the verge of losing, you know, their apartment. I've given people places to sleep in my own home
Sure.
that didn't have a place to go. You know, some people's car breaking down, and you know, we get together and we raise a couple of bucks and slide it under the table.
Yeah.
Like these are the things that people don't often see, and I don't want them to see. I'm not trying to say this
Right.
to be like
No.
self-aggrandizing.
If anything, you purposely don't talk about
I
it.
purposely
Yeah.
don't talk
You're
about
very
this
close
stuff,
to
right?
the best with
the,
that
the,
stuff.
the charitable stuff that we do, like all the behind the scenes stuff that we do that people just never learn about. That's community. That's community.
Yeah, and you know, it comes back, right? Because, you know, you've always been like that. Again, I told you the story about how, you know, I had that perception coming in from the merger with Simro of like, oh, these guys are going to hate us, but you're there with open arms and giving back and helping the police officers. And then you had a situation back on Kaiser with the house fire.
Yes.
And then we
Yeah.
rallied around you.
Yeah.
You know, so we do have a true sense of community.
Oh, God, yeah.
And I'll tell you, like, it wasn't always like that. When we left,
No.
when we left Scranton MMA and opened Gracie NEPA again, right? The rebirth
Yes.
of Gracie NEPA. We all had a chip on our shoulder. You, of course,
I
especially.
did. I had a
right?
big one. Yes.
You, of course.
Yes.
But we all had that mentality. You were the general, and we were the soldiers.
Yeah,
Right?
yes.
I tell the stories about a couple months after we opened, some of our old training partners from that other gym that we used to train at came over, for whatever reason. Maybe it was Olive Branch, like, hey, we miss you guys. Maybe it was, let's see how they're doing over there, like how their jiu-jitsu is. Yeah. And it didn't go well for them.
Ass-beating machine.
It didn't go well for them. So, like, we had a chip on our shoulder. And, if I'm being honest, and, we're being honest now. So, like, if I'm being honest, there were times in the Kaiser Avenue days where it got a little cliquey. In my perception, at least, especially during those times where we were, the cop stuff was going on. Yeah. It got a little cliquey, and who was bashing this guy, and this guy don't come to class, and this guy only trains, whatever, right? I could tell you this, when I was contemplating my return in 22, I was skeptical. Yeah. And I came back to that specific program because it wasn't class. Right. It was a law enforcement workshop. Yes. And I'm like, I'm going to feel this place out. Right. Because when I walked away, it was a little cliquey. It wasn't bad. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't bad. But, there was an interior stress going on. There definitely was, And so I didn't know what the perception of me coming back was even going to be. Was it going to be like, oh, here's this guy again, or why is he back, or was it going to be open? I didn't know. Yeah. So like I was a little skeptical about like how it was going to be, and I could tell you, I've been back now for 4 years, right? There is none of that here. None of it. In this version of this academy at this location. Yeah. There is none of that here. Yeah. Everybody wants to help each other. Right. There are like you said, are some people better friends than others because they hang out outside the mats? Of course. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Yeah. I'm probably not going to hang out with a 26-year-old competition purple belt. Right. Yeah. Because, you know what I mean? Like, I got to go, I have my son. I live a different life at 51 than that person. So I might not be best friends with that guy and go to dinner with them all the time. But when I'm with that guy on the mat, we're like brothers. Yes. Like Nick Backman. Yes. Great kid. Yes. You know what I mean? Just a great kid. I can't relate to a 20-some-year-old, stud, competition, purple belt. Right. Right? But you would never know if me and him were standing there on the mat together. You would never know that we're different. Right. At that moment, we're not different. We're not. We're jiu-jitsu practitioners. Yeah. We're not. Right? And like, I respect those guys so much. And they've given me nothing but love. Yeah. Right? Here's these guys that look at me, look at this old guy coming back. And it wasn't like that. And I still have that like mentality, some reason in my head that like, oh, these guys, and I'll never forget one time, John Caskey, down in the locker room, he comes to my class a lot, 9:30, Tuesdays and Thursdays, but he also trains primarily with Tyler at that company. And I'll never forget, like, I make these things up in my head sometimes. I have an overactive brain, and I'm like, I don't know what you might have heard from those guys down there, and he's like, Chuck, he's like, I have never heard a word in this entire organization about you other than like respect. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yes. So you can get that out of your head. Nobody's sending like hate, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just me trying to clear that old mentality of how it used to be, and like when I walked away and stuff. But I can assure, I mean, and our students know, but I can assure anybody listening to this from the outside wondering, where to join or what the atmosphere is like at Gracie NEPA headquarters, there's none of that here. Yeah. It's all about sharing jiu-jitsu, making each other better, making our teammates better, and just working towards the common goal, which is not the next rank or the next medal, it's the acquisition of skill in the art. Yes. You know what I mean? Correct. Do you want to get better today than you were yesterday? Yes. And if the answer is yes, this is the place to be. Yeah, 100%. So this is the place to be. We're going to start wrapping up. We're going to have lots of conversations. Yeah. But what I want to do, for those of you guys who are watching and have been watching, in the comments section or in person, because we see a lot of you guys in person, questions that you want answered, topics you want us to talk about, most importantly, guests, guys. People that you want to join us at this table, sit down, have conversations with, and start to learn how we're not all that different from each other. All right, so pop all of those into the comments section, or slip it into my DM, and we'll get some extra guests on here and start talking, learning their stories. Because one of the things that we spoke about off the air here was kind of what is the purpose of this, what time is it podcast? Yeah. And it's to show that the black belts are not the most important people in the room. So
I'm going to let you chew on that. Chuck, thanks, brother.
Yeah, happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you.
A lot more stories to come, trust me. This guy's got a lot more stories he's not telling us, but we'll get it out of him sooner or later.
Sooner or later, we'll get it out. All right, guys, see ya.